Well, welcome to Gratitude Space Radio. I'm Chris Palmore, and I'm here with my co-host, Peter Williams, and our special guest, Sharon. So, welcome to Gratitude Space Radio and Productive Accidents. Good morning, Peter, and good evening, Sharon. How you guys doing?
Terrific.
Excellent.
Doing well, thanks.
Peter, you want to, I'll let you take over here. You know, this is you're Mr. Productive Accidents, and you're connecting us with Sharon here. So, you go ahead, man. Is your signal not working very well there, Peter? Are you okay?
Sure. Thanks, Chris. So it's 7 a.m. here. Yeah, can you hear me?
Can hear you. The video's
Hang
a
on.
little punchy, but we can't hear you.
Happened?
You switched from the home network
Turn off the Wi-Fi
to your... yeah, he's...
so I'm pretty sure you can hear me better now.
Yes.
Yes.
I think Chris has disappeared. So this little story came about because of a series of productive accidents, as usual. And what are productive accidents? A little preview to that. Sharon and I met at business school in Singapore. We were studying at the University of Chicago, Chicago Booth School of Business. And one of our professors talked about how does innovation happen? And it's about building bridges between closed networks, different industries, different locations. And, I met Chris through definitely a productive accident. I was doing a program from Akimbo Workshops called the Creatives Workshop. And someone in there mentioned something about gratitude. I have a gratitude project. And I reached out to that person, and eventually it led to meeting Chris, and it's turned into a whole bunch of collaborations, which is just the definition of productive accidents, including a book that Chris is publishing in a couple of weeks called The Gratitude Anthology. And we've got a bunch of contributors from my connections and around the world. Lots of good fun. So yeah, that's my little intro in terms of how we all sort of came together today. And this is episode 4 of this little experiment, and it's going to keep on evolving. There's lots of people we need to talk to over time.
Excellent. Yeah. Thanks for the intro there, Peter. This is episode 4. We had, we started with Thor, your friend who's landlocked in Hong Kong. And then we talked with Manu and Gail. And then we had Gino on last week. And now we have your friend Sharon, who you've actually mentioned to me several times. So I would love for you to speak more about your connections with Sharon, and then allowing her obviously to tell us more about herself.
So Sharon, the good thing about that program was we had lots of different industries coming together, and that was, by design. The school wants to create this concept of productive accidents. So Sharon's a journalist. I think at the time she was the executive producer for ESPN Asia, doing their sports programming. And that's a little bit different to working in a bank. So, we had doctors, we had engineers, we had oil and gas people, shipping logistics, all those good things. And Sharon, has a talent for words and ideas. And she made a name for herself pretty quick. In fact, it extended all the way through to the end of our program, and Sharon gave sort of, the speech on behalf of the students to our graduation. And subsequent to that, I've caught up with Sharon in New York and stayed in touch through our, Sharon's 2 daughters and our oldest daughter of similar age. So they're kind of around the same sort of space, and lots of good things. And Sharon's got a bit of an adventure. She's been living the last 10 years, and a lot of good things happening despite COVID this year. So I'm looking forward to hearing about those and her perspective on resilience and persistence and all these things that I think she demonstrates. So back to you, Chris.
Okay. Well, I just wanted, Sharon, he just said a few things about you, and I'd love for you to, maybe you could speak to, it'd be fun to say, when you met Peter, what was that like? And obviously, you guys are very different. You come from different worlds, but here we are.
It sucked, basically.
No. None of that self-deprecation. There's no room for that. Yes, Peter and I were in business school together, and there were 99 people in our class. I think it went down to 93 by the time we graduated. And even with that amount of people, it was a very intimate group where we had many opportunities to get to know one another, uh, professionally, academically, socially. And toward the second half of the program, Peter and I were actually in the same study group where we were doing our case studies together and writing papers. And I was very fortunate to have a lot of associates who had quite a bit of quantitative experience. And my was easier for me were my muscles with words. So I could make and deliver the presentation if other people would put together the spreadsheets. So it was a really good collaboration and partnership. And I was able to lean on my classmates to get me through a lot of, you know, numbers work that was just very, very difficult for me, not innate, not intuitive, not part of my daily workflow at all. And I think that while it was very difficult for me, by forcing myself into that situation, I was able to also appreciate the things that were very easy for me, which were of value to my group. So I think one of the great things about business schools, it's kind of a 2-year valuation on yourself. Where are you among your peers? Where are you in your business and industry? And where are you relative to where you ultimately want to be? And Peter is a very outgoing, easy to get along with kind of guy. He was always up for a beer or a pint, and made it easy for us to study together in socially welcoming places. And Singapore is so accessible, which is where we were. And I got along famously with his wife, and his daughters are adorable. And, you know, it's a lifestyle that just makes it very easy to get to know one another. He got to know the man who I was married to at the time, and they have collaborated on projects together, which keeps the families close and intertwined. And it's really nice. I mean, he's Pete Williams. I mean, he knows everybody. He's, you know, such a juggler. He's always got 14 things going on. And I know that he sleeps, but I don't know when.
Right, and Peter, speaking about sleeping, it sounds like you know, I was seeing posts last night. So how much sleep did you get?
That is a great question. So we went to a movie last night. It was called Military Wives. Quite good, actually. It's about choirs, you know, of women that want to bond and keep busy while their husbands are on duty. And yeah, it's pretty intense, actually. But I had a bit of a nap during the movie, I have to say. It was a long week. And Sarah was with me because Catherine, unfortunately, wasn't feeling great yesterday. A bit of food poisoning, I suspected. Anyway, then we had a friend, he's a productive accident, one of Catherine's colleagues at PIMCO. Her boyfriend is a VJ, as in video jockey, which I'm not that familiar with. So they had a DJ at one end of the club and the VJ at the other end overlaying visuals. And so we went in there, and it's right below a bar called Frank's, and there's some guys that run a restaurant, sort of our neighborhood. You don't think of this in being in Hong Kong, but down the road in Soho here, down the escalator, one of our favorite restaurants is called Posto Publico, and it is New York, Brooklyn style Italian, authentic, right below, you know, where we live here in Hong Kong, which is kind of a weird combination, but it's amazing. And they have a bar called Frank's where it's all about music, and they have a great DJ. So we went in there, and their tradition is whenever you show up, they're giving you these espresso martini shots, and it's like, guys, you know, like, come on, we just arrived. And anyway, it turned into quite a long evening, but I did get sleep, and the alarm woke me up. So, you know, we're here.
Well, good to go. You know, we're playing with this new StreamYard, so I guess you guys will appreciate this. It's time for the gratitude checklist.
Oh my goodness! Feels like we're literally, you know,
we have banners.
We're on CNN or something, and it's popping up with little banner ads or something.
Very sophisticated.
Yes, thank you. Yes. So Sharon, this is where I like to just kind of delve into gratitude, and I just like to ask you in this moment, what are 3 things you're grateful for?
I am grateful for my children who are healthy and thriving and revealing themselves and opening themselves to the universe. That sounds
Mm,
a little new agey, but I mean, they're really both, they just dive into life head first. I have so much gratitude for their independence. So that's one.
beautiful.
Two, I have gratitude for my own health. I had cancer last year and surgery to
Mm,
remove it. And I'm perfectly healthy now, or at least, you
mm,
know, physically. I don't know about my mental health, but my physical health is great. And so I have a lot of gratitude for that. And I have a lot of gratitude. Um, Peter mentioned the word that I'm resilient. And it has been a very, very stressful year for everybody. And I have leaned on my resilience, and I'm so grateful that I have it because it has gotten me through a lot of uncertainty. So
mm.
I guess that's what I would say right now. Three off the bat.
That's beautiful. I love all that. Yeah. When I get around to mine, I'm going to speak to health too, but I'm going to let Peter, what three things in this moment are you grateful for?
Friendships, you know, and the friendships that formed around the world through that program, and you know, they become lifelong. But there's so many others that have popped up through COVID, which is surprising, right? You think you're going to be restricted, but the technology has opened up so many new conversations, whether it's through, you know, the creatives workshop leading to gratitude and pasta, leading to what we're doing here, to publishing a book, and all these things have somehow been enabled. Definitely, obviously, my family, right, and going out with Sarah last night was great fun, and unfortunately we haven't caught up with Isabella, who's in Melbourne, and Tom, who's in Sydney, for a while, because, you know, skipping countries is tough. And then we got Ruby, who's picked up a new school this year and adapted beautifully to technology, and now physically going to school. The third thing I'm going to mention is something that happened this week. Is this great little BMX store that just, you know, it's been there since we've been here 10 years in Hong Kong, and only went there for the first time this year, and met Jimmy, the founder, and he's got a guitar, and he starts jamming for us while we're in there, and took Greg March over there. He was buying, I better not say in case his kids are listening, but a couple of surprises for an event that happens in about 6 weeks from now. And anyway, really fun week. And turns out Jimmy was in a band called LMF, and I had to Google them to find out who the hell they were, but they're semi-famous here in Hong Kong. Yeah, good fun.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I appreciate Sharon what her gratitude was. I loved it when you mentioned your kids, how you didn't just, say your kids. You said there were so many things behind. You mentioned several things. You know what I mean? Like, it was like you had three or four really great things about your kids being. You said, obviously you're great for your kids, but you're grateful they're healthy. You're grateful that their minds are active and that they're coming into their own. I love that. And then, hearing about you, the fact that you're cancer free right now and that you're healthy is a beautiful thing. And I'm so grateful to hear that. And the resilience is wonderful too. And I was going to speak to health. The last, I guess, 5 months, what I've added to my gratitude journal is every morning, the very end of my journal is I write the word health, and then I go through a checklist in my head and go through all the people that I love in my life. And I just go, I'm grateful that they're healthy, and Peter's in there. Peter, you're the last like 3 or 4 people in that list, just letting you know. So
how do I get up towards the top of the list, man? What do I have to do?
Yeah, if only it was an orderly thing. It's more of me putting groups of people into there's like 4-second groups. There's grouping. So you're
I'm
in that.
feeling the positive vibes from a distance. Thank you. That's really cool.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I just think it's I start with myself, and I'm like, I'm really grateful I'm healthy, and I talk about, I think of my fiance, and I think about her family, and then I think about my family, and I think it's I think it's a great habit just to do, because if you're healthy all the time, you take it for granted. It's like, so I'm really happy. It benefited me this last 5 months is I feel like I get that more, and it allows me to be more present and appreciative of just the fact of being healthy, which is I'm so fortunate to have had all my life. So for the most part, so I love hearing that stuff. So thank you for that. So Sharon, I'm gonna if Peter, you okay with me? I ask another gratitude question.
Absolutely.
Go for it.
Okay, cool. So Sharon, this is kind of it's not a rapid fire, but it's basically, I'm going to ask you a question and then I want you just to give me a one name answer. Then I'm going to ask you a question again and then it's a different name. So that's kind of the juxtaposition there, okay? So when you hear somebody in life I'm grateful for, what name came to mind?
My grandfather.
Okay, and I'm going to ask it again.
Do you want a real name, like a proper name?
Oh, no, your grandfather's fine.
Okay.
I just want to ask you, so your grandfather's great. I'm ask you again, someone in your life you're grateful for. Who comes to your mind?
My father.
Your father. Okay. One more time. Someone in your life you're grateful for.
My boss.
Your boss. Okay. I would like to hear, and the reason I was asking that is I wanted to get it to be, I loved hearing about your grandfather and your father, but the reason I asked it that way is because I wanted to almost be spontaneous, opposed to the go-tos are always there. And don't get me wrong, they're great. And the cool thing is you just said their names, right? So like we get that goodness. But I was just curious in this moment why some things you're grateful for about your boss.
I think a lot of what we want right now, well, I can't speak for everybody. A lot of what I want is to be seen. I want to be seen. I want to be heard. I want to see and hear, but I also want to be seen and heard. And because our world is so isolated right now and our activities are relatively limited, I feel like my boss probably sees me and hears me more than most other people who I interact with on a daily basis. And because I feel she does see me and she does hear me, and she solicits my thoughts and she solicits my impressions, it makes me feel like I exist.
That's beautiful. You know, I did a birthday podcast with a new friend a few weeks ago, and she mentioned how her business she said my business partners are there with me and they allow me not to feel alone, and it was really beautiful. You know, and that's, I mean, you know, see, being with somebody who is either beside or, you know, and you're saying that they see you and they listen to you is a massively wonderful thing to be grateful for.
Yes.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So what do you think about that, Peter?
I think it's great because I'd love to hear, you know, Sharon talk about her journey, right? Life journey from beginning to where we are right now, because there's some great stuff in there. And yeah, let's hand it to Sharon. I don't need to talk.
Okay. Do you want to pivot her with that, or just go ahead?
I can just pick it up there. I mean, if I follow the framework of both my gratitude and the people for whom I have gratitude, my grandfather was among those who taught me my love for the news. And he used to read many newspapers every day. And he taught me to start with the obituaries to make sure you're not there. And if you're not in the obituaries, you carry on. Then you go to your horoscope to find out what's going to happen. Then you go to the sports page to find out what you slept through. And it was a whole framework. And he was also a wonderfully silly man. And he loved practical jokes and gossip. And he really had a very, very wonderful sense of humor that has certainly gone straight through the genetic line. My father, I mean, in many ways, I was his daughter more than my mother's daughter. And he was a very, very sweet and loving man. And I guess you could also say that he helped me feel be seen. And it was through him that I really discovered my true love for journalism. If I wanted to hang out with my dad, I wanted to be with him. And that meant watching the news at 5:30 every night. And if I wanted to talk to him, I needed to find the things that interested him. And news was sort of that Venn diagram of interests where we could have a mutual ground of things to talk about. And, you know, journalism, just interest in the news and current events has really been the common thread through my education and my professional career. And because my dad died when I was very young, I was 23, and I experienced such a catastrophic loss at that age, but I was on the cusp of adulthood. And I really learned in that moment that if I could get through that, because it was so horrible, I could do anything. And I really didn't need to be afraid because I'd already survived what to that point was the most horrible imaginable thing in my life. And that really freed me up to leave my home nest of Chicago and experiment with my journalism in really amazing places like Dubuque, Iowa, and Kalamazoo, Michigan. And these are places that a upper middle class Jewish girl from Chicago probably wouldn't necessarily go in pursuit of a better career, but that's what you have to do in journalism. And then I made it to Seattle and back to Chicago, where I met the man I would marry and be married to for 18 years. He was from Holland, and there was something about marrying someone and falling in love with someone who was not American that seemed so, pardon the word, alien, but also really interesting because as a word person, as a pop culture person, and as a journalist, I relied so heavily on things that I didn't even know at the time they were memes, but relied so heavily on memes as a shortcut for communication. And being with someone who didn't necessarily know what the Brady Bunch was, I couldn't make a Marsha joke. I had to really explain in my words how I felt about a certain moment. His career took us all over the world, and I was very fortunate that I was able to work wherever he got jobs. And that was first Singapore, then Hong Kong. We came back to the US for a stint in Atlanta and New York, and then back to Singapore. And it was Singapore 2.0 where Pete and I crossed paths and would forge a life friendship, which I'm so grateful for. And one of the real unexpected treats of an international career is that you get to learn how all different cultures and all different societies do the same thing, but approach it in a completely different way. And it teaches you a number of things. It teaches you, number one, there are a lot of ways to skin a cat, and the way you've always done something isn't the only way you can do it. It also teaches you about how a culture looks at a certain situation and how it problem solves. And it also teaches you about the values that a culture respects and doesn't care about, and things that don't matter. When I came back to the States after having lived in Singapore, I was in Miami, which is kind of another country separate from the United States, and lived in a world where I spoke Spanish at work and did broadcasting for Latinos in the United States at Univision. And again, another international experience that expanded my horizon on the kinds of things that I would do and could do. Ultimately, I got back to New York and decided to stay in one place long enough for my girls to graduate high school and launch off to college. And when they did that, I was able to go into New York City, which again is a whole other universe. And the last place I worked, I was there for 5 years. And a little bit more than a year ago, we got what's known in the United States as a WARN notice. It's the documentation that a company has to give its employees if a certain number are going to be laid off. And our company was closing shop. And the recruiters at the company I work for now were paying attention and reached out to me. And at first I didn't think, I wanted to go to Raleigh, North Carolina from a place like New York City. But it turned out that a lateral move or even move down turned out to be a big move up for me. And when I say I have gratitude for my boss, that's really where it comes from. Someone who saw something in me and persuaded me again to take another chance and reveal myself for unexpected surprises. So that's unfortunately the short version. We can talk about the long version another time.
Very cool.
So, yeah, I like. So basically, your husband is. If it wasn't for your husband, you never would have met Peter.
That's
There's a
right.
lot going on in your story, obviously, but I picked up like, oh, well, you were moving around with your husband, the flexibility of that, and then you happened to cross Peter, and here we are.
Well, it's right. I mean, you have to be. Uh, One of the things my grandmother taught my mother, she was complaining that she didn't have a boyfriend. And my grandmother said to my mom, I've never known anyone to meet the love of their life in their living room, which was her basic way of saying, get up and get out. That's how you're going to meet people. That's how you're going to put your way in the self in the way of productive accidents. And, but it takes courage. It's not something that everybody can do or wants to do. A lot of people are very, very happy in their small, closed network. Um,
Right.
Other people, can only thrive when they sort of throw themselves into the deep end. And I've been one of those people.
And being a student of Peter's, I've gotten more involved in that in the last 3 to 5 months. So I have to thank him for reading his book. Really opened my eyes and made me just kind of feel like I thought his book allowed me to feel like I saw a full spectrum, opposed to just seeing a little element of things happening. So he's been helping me out a lot. That's for sure. So yeah,
And that's,
I'm completely with you. Yeah.
I have
Go
to
ahead,
say
Peter.
that the best thing that professor did for us, Ron Burt, was distill 100 years of research into a single phrase, right? So he could have just said, here's a bunch of cluster diagrams, and you've got to be the bridge between these clusters, and brokerage and closure, and all these technical sort of phrases. But he broke it down to put yourself at risk of productive accident. I'm pretty sure I could go back to the notebook where I wrote that down for the first time. But when we moved to Hong Kong, that's exactly the phrase that kept on resonating. It was like, okay, here we are in a new place. How do we make the most of it? And when opportunities started popping up, like to become the captain of a tennis team, it was sort of there in my, I don't know, somehow it lifted out of my subconscious. And my first reaction was, why would I want to be a captain of a tennis team? It sounds like a bunch of admin and a job that no one should really go for. But I said, look, just hang on for a minute before I make a decision. Tell me more about this team and the nature of it. And at the time, there were 40 guys in this team at LRC, Ladies Recreation Club, fresh grads out of university, right up to retired partners at law firms and investment firms, lots of different industries, lots of different nationalities, lots of different skill sets. And I just thought, well, hang on, that looks like a recipe for productive accidents. I've got to say yes if I'm going to live this framework. And because I was new to the club, I sort of went, okay, let's get to know you guys a little bit faster. I sent out a survey, and it was just like, who are you? Where are you from? What do you do? Do you have any children? Where do they go to school? Maybe our kids overlap somehow. Just trying to look for some connection. And then, we're about to play competition tennis. I'd never played competition until I joined that club. I'd only played socially, and competition is a different animal. You can be up against 70-year-old guys, and they just play not to make an error. They're like a brick wall, and we're up there trying to play like, Nadal and Federer and do all these funky shots, and we're the ones making the mistake, and we get whipped by this brick wall. Anyway, so it's a bit of a lesson. But the best thing I did in that survey was I said, look, how are we going to beat these guys? What is our strategy? We're going to be at the net, baseline, whatever. But the best question I asked was at the end. I said, look, just tell me something interesting about yourselves, a fun fact. What do you care about? And that's where the magic started to happen, because they'd reply and they'd sort of reveal sort of their personality and what they're interested in. One guy from Boston, and he wrote back and said, look, after 20 years in investment banking, the financial crisis happened, decided to pull the pin because this sort of productive accident was happening parallel, where he and his wife from Australia had bought land in Niseko, which is in the northern part of Japan. Powder snow heaven. A few emails later, we had our first snowboarding trip organised. I grew up on a skateboard and a BMX, but had never been snowboarding. But I'd already seen Burton Snowboards used to advertise in BMX magazines in the 80s, and I was always curious, like, oh, well, one day maybe I should check it out. They had planted the seed, which was, well done to their marketing crew, saying, these sports might overlap somewhere. And a couple of snowboarding trips turned into a summer camp where our eldest daughter was invited to be a camp coordinator. We thought we should check out summer. within a week, we're going, wow, summer's even better than winter, because there's, winter's sort of one-dimensional. It's snow, snow, and snow. Summer, you've suddenly got mountain biking, camping, whitewater rafting, golf, tennis, skateboarding, everything. And that's what planted the seed to buy some land and build a house over there. And, that wouldn't have happened unless, I took that leap into the tennis captaincy. And that's led to so many adventures, right? So my contribution to this whole framework is, okay, it's great for innovation and creativity and business development, but it actually turns your life into this adventure. Like literally a lot of cool things have happened over the last 10 years, which is why I had to write the book. Anyway, I'll pause there.
But I think the one thing that I want to say about that is, although they're productive accidents, none of it is accidental. None of it could happen unless you created the environment in which it could happen. And the energies that promote that include curiosity and courage and energy and hunger. And people without those qualities don't even have like the lens in their eyes to perceive that there's been a productive accident. So that's my only problem with the phrase productive accident, is I don't really think they're accidents.
Well, I mean, that's what the phrase "put yourself at risk" is. That's actually critical. It's like there's no guarantees. Whenever you're putting yourself at risk, there could be upside, there could be downside. But in my experience through this whole exercise, well, first of all, the overlap is finding things that you care about and turning those into collaborations, right? You make connections. My formula for building a network is you keep talking until you find something you both care about. You don't talk about what do you do at work. You talk about stories and values and beliefs and everything else. And when you find an overlap, whether it's skateboarding or BMX or travel or riding or whatever it is, gratitude in this case, that's how Chris and I ended up connecting. The next step is, well, let's collaborate. And so we're on episode 4 of a collaboration, and this other example of writing an essay for Chris's book that's coming out. It'd be cool to talk about that a little bit, Chris, and even how you stumbled towards gratitude. I think that's relevant to this whole story.
I would like to hear about that.
Oh, thanks, Gus. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Sharon. Yeah. Speaking to the productive accidents with us, I guess to go back in my story, my gratitude journey started in the fall of 2013, and my birthday was coming up, and I was listening to a podcast, and podcasts were fairly new, and I was listening to the Adam Carolla show, and he said that he's had a rant about how birthdays are like appreciation trophies, and if everyone gets one, where's the speciality in something that just is, and he said his suggestion was, if you want to have something special, either make it about something special, so it could be you made an achievement, or make it about somebody else. Basically it was like, make it about something else other than you were born, but it could be on your birthday. So the idea was like, let's make this a special day, but let's make it about something that's special opposed to just something that occurred. So that really resonated with me, and my birthday was coming up, and I decided at that moment that I was going to honor my mother. I wanted to do something special for my mom, and I didn't know at the time what that was, but that seed was planted in me. So on December 30th of 2013, I got up really early, like Peter does every day. Actually, probably a little earlier than normal, Peter. I think it was probably 4 in the but times are our lives, right? And I basically sat down and I typed out essentially what was a gratitude letter. And at that point, I put it on her Facebook page, and I sent it and let it sit there. And I did that for 2 reasons. I wanted her to find it. I wanted it to be a surprise, and I wanted it to be public because I wanted people to read it, because I was I love my mother, and I felt like what I wrote, there was no shame in anything I wrote. I was, if something's going to be on her page, I want people to read it. Especially, me telling, I love my mother. So, I went about my morning, and mid-morning, I was expecting to get a phone call from my parents. They normally call and sing happy birthday to me, but no call came. And I'm looking at the clock and I'm thinking, what's going on? So I decide, okay, I'm going to call my dad's cell phone because I still want this surprise to land with my mother. And I get my dad on the phone, and He wished me happy birthday, and then I immediately pivoted to, has mom read the letter? And he said she had, and that she couldn't talk to me right now, is what he said. Said that she needed time with it. And it really gave me a huge pause because, backstory is, I probably talked to my mom the day before. I'm the type of son that is, has openly told her that I love her. I would kiss her on the cheek at a very young age. No, the saying that she needs time with it feels like a story that would start with, oh, this is your estranged son. But it wasn't at all. That's why it was very, it made me take pause, in the whole thing, because that's not, if I had set out for that to happen, there would absolutely, somebody would have said, how can you get your mom to be speechless in an emotional way? There's absolutely no way I could have done that. I still am kind of baffled to this day that happened. And obviously I've analyzed these things, and obviously people are in different emotional states, and, they read things and they react to them, and it's a beautiful thing. So, later on that day, my mom and I saw each other and we talked, and it was just it just created a moment that hasn't been forgotten to this day, obviously, because I'm talking about it right now. And it directly, if I hadn't written that letter, and if you want to sidestep, if my mom wasn't such a loving person, then the three of us would not be in this room together, period. It just wouldn't be, it's just one of those things, these connector things. It's still that letter and that love for my mother is still resonating on a high level every day. If it's, our friend Gail that introduced Peter and me the other day, she's heard me talk about the letter, right? She's written for the book that has the letter in it. The other day she wrote me, said, Chris, I haven't read the letter. I'd like to read the letter, and I go, oh, that's great. Let me send it to you. So the other day, someone's wanting to read the letter. The book that's coming out in 2 weeks from now has the letter in it. It's going to go from this thing that's on a screen to being able to be in a Kindle, but also into a physical book that'll be, that can go anywhere in the world. And we all understand how cool that is.
Forever.
Yeah, forever. Exactly. It's it'll be imprinted. And, so that was December 30th, and I didn't know, what was coming up in life. My mom's cancer came back with a vengeance, and on April 30th, 4 months later to the day, she was gone.
Wow.
So what, I've analyzed this a lot, and it's amazing thing about gratitude is that, it's a new experience every time and for everybody. So analyzing this experience, I could say, just speaking in gratitude terms, I wrote a letter and had an experience. She read the letter, had an experience. We had an experience together. My dad had an experience. My sister had an experience. And then, at her funeral, I had a whole new experience. This is, I didn't want to speak at the funeral, and but my dad asked me if I wanted to. I said no, but I kept thinking about this letter, right? I kept thinking about how this letter did something that nothing could have ever done, or just foreseen happening. So I had my cousin read the letter at the funeral. So now I have a whole experience of the letter, right? I'm sitting at my mom's funeral, and I'm hearing my words being read back to me. Words like, I'm going to tell you I love you more this year. I'm going to spend more time with you. I'm going to make you more proud, And it really hit me, it was a very bittersweet thing in the sense that I was very grateful that I'd done this. I knew that it meant something, that it made a connection that was just not, it made us connect more than we ever had before up to that point. But in the same sense, all these promises I made, April 30th was the end of that. There was no more doing, the connection to be able to make that happen. So, I, again, whole experience, same letter, right? And then you got to think, at that point, I repost this letter on Facebook so that people that love my mother are now reading this and they're relating to it, because my mom was a very loved person. And anybody, if you share gratitude for somebody in a space, I like to call it gratitude art, when you make it a physical thing that people can feel, they can have their own experiences with it, and they can feel gratitude because you've spoken up, because they've seen it, right? It's like if you see a piece of artwork, you can have an emotion, right? But if somebody just kind of told you, like, oh yeah, it said, okay, the Mona Lisa, like, there's this old, this lady, and she's wearing a, you know what I mean? Like, it's not the same thing, but when you can read words, or you can see video of people sharing gratitude, it's a powerful mirror that allows us to reflect back on our own lives and allows us to think, get us into a space to be grateful. And I feel that and that's what this podcast is. Everything I'm doing the last 5 years, the interviews, the podcast, the book, everything is just me wanting to create a space to allow people to go, what am I grateful for? Or yes, I'm grateful for that. Or just the reflective reminder. And Peter's helped me with that a lot. He's been a huge, people he's connected me with, being this podcast right now. He's had several people write for the book. He's my, I've got MVPs that brought people in, and Peter's one of them. Massive MVP when it came to just initiating people to write letters. And speaking to the book, and then I'm going to stop talking so I'm really taking over the conversation here. The beautiful thing about the book is it's called Dear Gratitude, an Anthology. And in the book, there's over 50 people that wrote letters and essays in gratitude. So the cool thing about the book is doing exactly what I want to do. I want to initiate people to do that. And I'm speaking this because the amazing thing about gratitude and people initiating gratitude is it's a full force every time. So the fact that Peter wrote a letter and then he got his daughter to write a letter, I feel that. It's all the same. It doesn't deteriorate one bit. I just know I initiated, I asked Peter, and then he asked other people, and then they made the magic happen. And it excites me to no end that happens. And I know the book. So for one thing, the book is a massive success. There's 50 people who wrote gratitude in it. It's a massive success. It doesn't, you know what I mean? Like just the fact that it's being created and people took time, it's a massive success. I get to share a little bit of my story. Basically, it's a little bit of Chris. It's up-to-date Chris, and it's not Mary Chris. It's the simplistic story of Chris, but then it's everyone's gratitude. So the cool thing about gratitude is it's different people, and this book has every flavor that you can imagine in it. So anybody reading it, it can be used as a daily journal, but anybody reading it is going to find something that's going to reflect to you that you're gonna relate to, and it's a really beautiful thing. And at the end of the book, I wrote my at the very end, I let people know that this book is going to create another book. There are going to be experiences, and I don't know if it's going to take 10 years, 5 years, 1 year, 6 months. I don't know, but the cool thing is this book is going to initiate people to have experiences, and then we're going to create another book with those experiences. So, thank you, thanks for listening, guys.
That's great.
That's great.
I think
Sharon, so what are you thinking about? I'm curious. How do you react to all of that?
Well, I kind of came full circle, and I was thinking that Chris and I both suffered huge losses, and I think out of loss comes an appreciation that life is short. And when life is short, you don't have time to fool around. You got to get going. You got to make it happen. And so I think each of us have been motivated both through love and through loss to make the most of our time. And I've had the blessing to pour a lot of that into my kids. I think you do the same, Peter. And it all pays back. The thing about gratitude is that the act of being grateful bestows upon the giver the gifts. And it just circles back and back and back in ways that you really can't even predict.
That's why the Go-Giver book is kind of a parable of 3 or 4 careers that are successful because the first act was generosity. And instead of thinking, I'll help other people, but only when I've got my house and my Porsche and my whatever, if you do it parallel, not that you're chasing those materialistic things, but the quicker you learn that helping other people without expecting anything in return is pretty important, the better. And Sharon's part of this dinner series that I stumbled across as well, Ball of Dinners, Patrick Gibb founded, and the whole mindset is, what is your story? What projects you're working on? And the third question, kind of where the magic happens, is, how can I help? And when I learned that this group or this community sort of existed, I was like, oh my God, that's like That's like Productive Accident, the virtual version of Productive Accidents. I need to be part of that. And now there's about 1,800 people worldwide. And what I love is, every morning you get up and you see people collaborating, and they have no connection. They're not at the same company, location, nationality, anything. And if it wasn't for that group, I probably wouldn't have self-published. And if you don't, the first book, and if you don't do the first book, it's unlikely you're doing a second book. Like literally, my first question to these guys was, I want to learn how to self-publish. And this was in a private Facebook group. And next thing you know, someone jumped on, just like I'd sent you a WhatsApp, and it was almost instant, saying, look, you need to meet my friend. He's from Zimbabwe. He's taught middle school in England. He's now living in Silicon Valley. He's just self-published 3 books.
Was that Austin?
The person?
Was that Austin?
Austin Kleon, you mean?
Who was the person? Never mind.
No, it's a totally different guy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but anyway, I'll have to go and dig out the details. But what was cool is the next morning she connected me to this guy, and we had a Skype on the way to work. And he said, yeah, it's easy. You go into CreateSpace. It's a subsidiary of Amazon. And, you can publish to Kindle. And 6 months later, I published a book about... So my experience of loss is different to your guys. So I'm fortunate in that both my parents are still healthy, and 88, 86. Actually, Gail interviewed them, which was amazing, and wrote a poem about their journey, which was pretty amazing. Yeah, so I had to think about it for a while, but, so our collective family's loss was my wife's youngest sister, who was 18, and she, got into film school. She went on a gap year, and unfortunately, in a remote part of Australia, went missing 18 years ago, and has not been, found. Hasn't been solved, and that tragedy, sort of this ambiguous loss is what they refer to it as, because you're not really sure until you've got closure. That's definitely made me be more open to doing things in the now, like don't wait until you're retired, do stuff along the way. And that's what the first book was about. I actually curated her artwork and her poetry and her writing and photography and everything else. And, that was a way of sort of just making sure this stuff wasn't lost, because stories are really important. That's another big lesson over the last 10 years. If you don't write stories down, or you don't capture them on paper or in digital, or, whatever medium it is, it's like they didn't happen. And so, you don't want that, that situation. So a lot of these ideas converged. And you're right, Sharon, if you don't have curiosity, what is the root cause of all this? If you just, don't explore things, then nothing happens. So, yeah, you've got to keep going back to find out, what is the trigger. But then once you see these things happen, it's like very predictable and very repeatable. Like, you can have sustainable serendipity, and it should, it sets you up for how do you deal with difficult things. Your stories have, Chris, the fact that you give something on your birthday flips things around. So for this year, I actually bought a pair of Vans checkered slip-on shoes for my dad. As an 88-year-old, he needs a pair of skate shoes, clearly, and a black and white checkered scarf for my mum. And I bought a matching one of those scarves for me. And that black and white checkered scarf actually, it's connected to this story. Vans, I'm a big fan. Growing up on a skateboard and BMX, Vans, the brand, they always have black and white checkered sort of flags as part of their imagery and so on. So the way I interpret that is it's like the start of a BMX race and the finish, but you can use that as a way of reminding yourself, how do you make the most of the beginning and the end of anything, a week, a year, a month, a life. But I'm really interested in what happens in between. And so, yeah, that's why, giving that to them was kind of fun. And I see Dad wearing these shoes on weekends, and it's kind of funny. Yeah. And you're wearing a black and white checkered shirt, I think, right now, Chris, if I zoom in on you.
It's a little blue, but yeah, my fiance gave
Okay.
it to me. Yeah.
That's part of the branding going forward. We have to add it to the screen.
Okay. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Speaking back to what Sharon was saying, about, and then Peter mentioned about loss, I feel like I feel like loss allows you to be in a space where if you can, analyze the loss, you can find a lot of gratitude. And I was speaking the other day about this. It's the reason that we're so sad, right? The reason why there's a lot of pain is because there were a lot of good memories and there was love, right? So what's the flip side of that feeling? Okay, you had no connection, the person's gone, right? So it's a bittersweet thing, but speaking to my own experience, it allowed me to go. I know how fortunate I am that I had a woman that loved me so much for 35 years. I get that, right? I'm so fortunate. I'm so grateful for that. It's not a given. People are born that don't have parents that want them. There's people that are born where their parent dies. There's a whole lot of scenarios that play out, right? But I was fortunate that I was born into two parents that wanted me. They loved me. And my mom, who was my superhero for 35 years, I got to be the center of her attention. I got to be her focus. When I was writing the book recently, I wrote a short story here. Is I didn't know what the name of the book was going to be, and I read, and one person wrote an essay called a letter called Dear Gratitude, and I read it, and it made me cry. And then my editor was like, I was like, we need to make. I was like, this is a book, and she goes, why don't you write one of those? And I go, okay, okay, thanks for the prompt. And I sat down and I wrote this, I wrote a letter as like gratitude with an individual you were talking to, almost like it was your caregiver, right? Or your buddies with your whole life. And it made me take a pause because I was thinking about my mother. I was thinking, in my situation, if my parents hadn't had a miscarriage the year before, and I mean a miscarriage where the baby was actually born premature and lived 24 hours, if that hadn't happened, and at that point they hadn't decided we still want a son, I never would have been born. But let's go a little further with that. Because of that situation, what happened was the doctor the next year said, we need to sew you up so that you don't deliver early, that it made me actually click when I was writing. I'm telling you this because I was writing this Dear Gratitude letter, right? I went, wow. My mom wanted me here so badly that she had stitches put inside her body just so I would show up on time. How I never even thought about that, right? I thought about how cool it was, right, that happened, but I never thought about what's the physical, you know what I mean? Like, where's the psychological aspects of those moments? And that comes even back to me when I wrote my letter to her on my birthday. I was like, this day should be yours. I have no memory of this day. That's what I wrote. I was like, I couldn't tell you anything about it, but you could. You've got emotions to it. You were there. You were planning for it. It should be her day. I think. I feel like birthdays, if the parents are around, it should be a parents' day. Or let's make it a group gathering. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, really, she a celebration. Oh, you're together. What a celebration, right? So I'm done ranting.
One of the best traditions in the US is obviously Thanksgiving, right? There's no commerce around it. It seems legit. And actually, Sharon and her husband actually invited us to their place for Thanksgiving one year in Singapore, which was pretty cool to close the loop. But Sharon, I know you've written about your father and some of the stuff that he went through as well. I think he might have had cancer, and he shaped your treatment plan and the decisions you made. I want to hear a little bit about that.
Well, my father had very bad acne and came of age in the 1950s. And there was a very small window where the medical community embraced the possibility that you could use head and neck radiation to get rid of acne. So they blasted his head and neck, and I don't even know if it got rid of the acne, but pretty soon he had thyroid cancer. And they told him, when he was age 30, that they would have to take out his thyroid, and he would either live forever or die in 6 months. And in fact, he bought another 20 years. When I had my diagnosis, what they wanted to do was a partial removal, what they call a lumpectomy, and radiation. And I know that radiation has evolved a lot since my father was radiated, but there seemed something antithetical. I wasn't persuaded that radiation was going to save my life. It felt more like it might end it. And if I had another option, I really wanted to pursue that. And that option was, double mastectomy, just to have the breast removed entirely. And every doctor I talked to said, "Oh, no, 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 you don't need to do that. Just get the lumpectomy and radiation, lumpectomy, radiation." I'm like, I don't want to. And it turned out that by having the whole breast removed after they did the pathology, the cancer that they thought was just in this one little tiny area was actually all over. And but because I listened to my heart, it helped me make the right decision for myself. And then the other thing about my dad and just sort of how we find these strands that sort of tie our stories together. He was an obstetrician gynecologist, and his whole career was bringing life into the world, and doing the things like the doctor did for your mom. Coming up with all of these hacks to ensure life, and it was really quite amazing growing up. And anytime he wasn't, at the dinner table or to see me in the morning or to put me to bed, it was because he was being called on to bring life into the universe or to prevent a loss of life. And that is something that really teaches you at a very early age, kind of almost like a spirituality, if you want to look at it that way. But I wanted to get back to something else that you said, Chris, about your mom having the stitches. You looked at that as sort of like this gift of hardship that allowed you to be born safely. For her, it was a medical procedure that was, kind of like part of the whole pregnancy. And I guess the point I wanted to make is there are all these things that happen, and it's how we look at them that gives them meaning, and how we express them to ourselves and to other people that gives them meaning. Some people would say, "Oh, my dad was a doctor," but it's how I looked at what he did and how much it meant to him, and therefore how much it meant to me. You look at your mom as a woman wanting to give birth. Other people would say, "Oh, right before me, my mom had a miscarriage, and we were really lucky that that didn't happen with me." And again, we get into luck and accidents, and I don't really believe in luck, and I don't really believe in accidents, although at risk for, I understand, Pete. So it kind of comes to like a lot of things happen. It's the way you put yourself in the crosshairs of the opportunity, and then also how you focus on it and find the vision and meaning in it.
Yeah, I think
Right.
if you assume good things are going to happen, that's the lesson for me, then they do. They just keep on happening. And you find like-minded people that once you have the vocabulary, everyone sees that, oh my God, yeah, that's how I got that job, and that's how I met my partner and everything else. And even like going on a random walk around a city, to me, is a great gateway to adventures and memories. I remember we were in Milan, and I was at a Vespa shop sort of drooling about all these little accessories and everything else, and my wife and 4 children were being like, "We want to go back to the hotel, this sucks." And so I said, "All right, you go, I'll just navigate my own way home." I had a look at the Google map, and it was like, okay, it's a 15-minute zigzag walk, no problem. That walk is one of the most memorable travel experience I've ever had, because I walked into a bar, grabbed a Peroni, walked past this amazing architecture, past this mansion that had pink flamingos in the garden, which was just bizarre, I don't know why, and discovered this opera house and this park that had all these vintage rides, like a Dodgem car ride and a Ferris wheel and pony rides. And that was only 300 meters from the hotel. The next day I could bring back, our 3 youngest kids, and they had this experience that they wouldn't have had. And I took these, photos that are priceless. And then I went back to work in Hong Kong, and I had an Italian colleague, and I sort of told him about this walk in this neighborhood. I showed him a photo. I said, "Yeah, I have an apartment in that building." And I was like, "Get out of here." Anyway, weird stuff happens all the time. But anyway, you got to start these conversations and just continue them, and keep these stories evolving. This is our 10th year anniversary from graduating from Chicago, and we still got this WhatsApp group. People are interacting, people in all across the world, which was kind of the magic. even though we were the Asia campus, we were very international anyway. Like, so, I'm coming in to Singapore from Australia, Sharon's, coming in from the US, and other people from Africa and India and Europe and everywhere else. Yeah, pretty amazing. And especially we went in with I didn't have any expectations. I went in thinking it's 80% about the content, 20% people. Halfway through it was 50-50. By the time we graduated, it was literally 99% people. The rest of it, we can look it up in a book sometime, but the other things, the relationships, the connections, they're the priceless things.
No, the rest of it, you end up writing the book.
That's it. Yeah, absolutely. And, the way you described it, Sharon, you could say, yeah, my dad was a doctor and he went to a hospital, as opposed to he saved lives and he brought people into the world. That's a totally different experience. And that's, like writing a brand or a mission for a company or even a role. Like, I think of people doing anti-money laundering and they say, oh yeah, you saved the firm in some expenses. If you express that in, oh no, you saved a life from being trafficked or slavery or something like that, it's a totally different experience, and they'll feel so much more pride and energy going to work. And that's why actually the guy who wrote the foreword to the book, John Wood, his most recent book is called Purpose Incorporated, and it says, look, a company that has a purpose beyond just basic profit and shareholder value, which is where the traditional way of thinking about running a company, if you have a purpose beyond all that, then it's a competitive advantage, because your staff are going to be coming into work more loyal, more energized, more creative, more productive, everything else. And so it's a big lesson, getting through this. The companies that are going to survive are going to have something beyond the basics.
What surprises me in this time of COVID, where 200 and maybe 50,000 Americans have died. Illinois alone had 15,000 new cases yesterday. Why our universe hasn't jumped to a greater expression of the value of life. I don't understand. There hasn't been a day of mourning in the United States, let alone a week. I mean, they lower flags every other day for someone who dies in a car accident. But here we have this humongous loss, and there doesn't seem to have been what seems to me to be like an appropriate response to that kind of loss. And I don't understand it. Where's our gratitude for all of these lives? Sorry to be such a downer.
No, it's a great point.
Yeah. Yeah.
There should be a global,
yeah. There's so much unfortunately, so much other stuff that's not really important going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's overshadowing what's important, which is life.
Right.
Yeah. Speaking, I know we're getting close to the end of our time here. I just wanted to tell Sharon, speaking to, to how people tell their stories, and what we get to kind of focus on what's important in our stories. What, if you go back, so for example, I could have said my mom passed away to cancer, but I didn't even add in that, that 10 years before there was a new procedure, and that because she was born at that specific time, had the right doctor, and the medicine was there, that she was in recovery for 10 years. And I got to have another 10 years with my mom, so it's like, if she would have been born 30 years ago, she would have died. Like her mom did die of cancer, and again, with modern technology, every year, new stuff's coming up. And I know how fortunate, again, if you just go, well, she could have been taking me at 25 instead of 35, I'm very grateful for the doctors at the time, and the fact, you know what I mean? Like, just like you're saying, your choices you made, if it was 15 years ago, who knows if that would even been a choice? Maybe they just would have like, you're doing radiation. That's it. That's your go-to. But now,
Yep.
So I think it's a beautiful thing to point out. And that's in gratitude, we start looking for ways to analyze our stories and like what's really happening. You have a choice to focus on. We can focus on just the grief, or we can focus on the good stuff that's there, because there's a lot.
You're basically focusing on what went right in that story, not what went wrong, which might be the default for some people.
There was a time this spring where We were in lockdown. I was working from home, which was very hard for me psychologically and technically. And the President Trump was having these long and wandering briefings every day where he was talking about bleach and sunlight into the bodies. And I was just, I felt like I was falling apart. I just didn't know what to do. I couldn't scream loud enough. And I talked to my therapist about it. And I said, I really don't know what to do with myself at the end of a day. And she said, get into bed. And, you've got 10 fingers and literally go through each finger and think of something that you're grateful for.
Mm.
And if you get to the 10th and you're not asleep, do another 10. And since then, that gratitude exercise, you write in a journal every morning. I count my fingers at night. And
Mm.
it has been a very, very helpful transition for me from, consciousness to a peaceful sleep.
Amazing. Thanks for
That's
sharing
beautiful.
that. I didn't know that story.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing about gratitude, right? Is it brings us to the present moment and allows us to get rid of that noise that's really not right here. It's more saying. So I love to count the fingers. I love you said in the morning. I'm gonna have to quote. Anyways, go ahead. I love how you put that. It was beautiful.
That's it.
Well, Peter, what do you want to? I know we're a little over an hour here. Do you want to give a little recap here and close us out?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've just sort of scratched the surface. I know Sharon's got a lot more content that we could bring out, and one of the I guess the benefits of having this productive accidents gratitude space experiment is that we're just playing around with it and learning as we go. So the intention is to kind of make it organic, and next time it'll be Sharon, Chris, and somebody else that overlaps, that we've collaborated with or connected to. And, it'll skip an episode or 2 or 3, it doesn't really matter, but it's this evolving chain of connection. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to bringing Sharon back. And the good thing is she'll have had a little bit of time to digest. We touched on some topics, but there'll be other stuff that she'll go, oh, yeah, I should have spoken about that. And maybe we'll be a little bit more intentional, but we'll interweave another story, in amongst the 4 of us. And it'll, I don't know if anyone's listening. Doesn't really matter, actually. Just the process of having a conversation and just capturing it just in case is pretty cool. So yeah, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Sharon, for
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Chris.
all of this.
Oh, thank you, Peter. Thank you, Sharon. Yeah, it's been wonderful.
I look forward to having
Go
more
ahead.
accidents.
Yeah, we'll definitely do this again for sure. As long as Peter's up for it, I'm game all day long. I told him I just want to talk to people, hear stories, share a little gratitude. This is what I want to do. So having a partner like Peter is and getting to meet wonderful people like you is just it's such an amazing thing. And I remember after I did the podcast with Peter, I said to him, if you want to do this, we could do this. And eventually I said it enough times that here we are.
And what's amazing is that a lot of the ideas are happening in real time, like through WhatsApp. You say, hey, what do you think of this? I say, yeah, well, you could do this and you could do that. And then before you know it, we've got 3 or 4 different iterations, like in a very short amount of time. And the fact that you just do stuff, it's like, holy shit, you've built it in like a couple of days. You switch technologies and, playing around with the functionality and everything else. Like, we're learning as we go, but it's amazing. So thank you for your energy and the whole, just the fact that you're bothering to do all this is
it's all
cool.
very inspiring.
Thank you. I want to tell you, Peter, us using the StreamYard right now is a direct relation of a productive accident with you, with me going on your Hong Kong meeting Gino introducing me to Andy, me connecting with Andy, and me watching his live podcast and seeing this format, and me writing and going, are you using Zoom? What are you doing there? What's going on? And here we are. So that's a direct accident of multiple relationships of me showing up.
It all comes full circle.
Yeah.
I wrote something on LinkedIn this week where the copy of the book landed up in Sydney, and the people that had put a photo of it on LinkedIn and you know, just tracing back the steps to how did I meet them and what happened. And you know, it's another 5-minute conversation, but I'll share the link to you guys later, and you'll see that I'm as interested in how things happen as what happens. But in the book, all I talk about is what happened, because if I had have taken that extra 3 layers or 4 layers or 5 layers down, it would have, you know, people might have been bored. It's not relevant. But, you know, that's something I want to dig into. Like every time we have a conversation, like how did we meet? How did Sharon and I meet? And what happened next? And then what happened? What did our children do? And, you know, and how did they overlap? And how did they collaborate? And whatever, you know. So there's lots of stories, and they're gonna keep coming out, which is the fun part of this. So yeah, let's keep going.
Thank you, guys.
Oh, thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Peter. Well, hey, I'm going to close it up here, guys. Don't hang up. I just wanted to say, you know, again, thank you, Sharon, for coming on, and Peter, and I'm Chris, and just remind you guys, you have a lot to be grateful for, and there are a lot of productive accidents to get out there and get yourself in the mix that you can stumble across. So you all have a wonderful night, and thanks for staying with us.